everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing a video all about some books that have been on my shelves for quite some time. Some of these books not so much, but quite a few of these books have been on my shelves for well over a year, and so obviously these are all backlist titles that I really want to get to in 2021. And this is a pretty random assortment of books. There's a lot of different genres going on as well, so without further ado, let's just get into it. I'm just going to pull from the top of this first stack. So I have A Night to Surrender by Tessa Dare. So this is book one in Tessa Dare's Spindle Cove series, which was published before her Castles Ever After series. So in chronological order, with Avon at least, it goes Spindle Cove series, then Castle Ever After, then Girl Meets Duke series, in case you were curious about that. So I have been slowly but surely working my way through all of her backlist titles, and so this is the series that I really want to get through in 2021. I feel like I don't need to say much about this book or this series or Tessa Dare in general. I think you guys know at this point how much I love her. And then another historical romance that I really want to get to is Destiny's Surrender by Beverly Jenkins. This is book two in her Destiny trilogy. I read book one, which is Destiny's Embrace. I actually have it right here on my bookshelves, and I absolutely adored that book. I gave it 5 stars. That was my very first Beverly Jenkins novel ever, and so I'm really excited to read this book. This is the second book, and then Destiny's Captive, which you can also see right here, is the third book in this series. So I am just so excited to read more from Beverly Jenkins in 2021. Next is a romance that Bree from In Love and Words has raved about. I'm pretty sure this is like her all-time favorite contemporary romance, and it has taken me entirely too long to get to this, and that is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. On the back of this book it says one of the top 100 romance novels of all time on Goodreads. So that's a pretty high claim there. So it sounds like the main character is running away from something. Maybe something traumatic happened to her where she's from, and so she's moved to this small town and she meets this guy Archer Hale, and I think he's a selective mute. It basically just says that he communicates with no one in the town, but I guess that he starts talking to her. So that sounds really amazing. I've heard nothing but awesome things about this romance. So next is another contemporary romance that so many people, not just Bree, but so many people in the romance community have raved about, and that is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is going to be my first romance that I'm reading by Colleen Hoover. The only other book that I have read by her was Verity, which is her one and only thriller, so I know that this is going to be quite a bit different. So I'll just read you a little bit of the synopsis. It says, Lily hasn't always had it easy, but that's never stopped her from working hard for the life she wants. She's come a long way from the small town in Maine where she grew up. She graduated from college, moved to Boston, and started her own business. So when she feels a spark with a gorgeous neurosurgeon named Ryle Kincaid, everything in Lily's life suddenly seems almost too good to be true. Something tells me that it is too good to be true, and something is going to go wrong, and that this is going to be a very emotional and heavy romance, but I am really looking forward to reading Colleen Hoover's romance novels. Next up, we got a chunky book, and this is also a romance. It is an extremely slow burn romance, of course, which is why it's so chunky, and that is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. So this past year I read From Lukov with Love, and I devoured that book. It was so amazing. Mariana Zapata is definitely the queen of extreme slow burn romances, and this one I believe is her longest book to date. I think it's over 700 pages, so yes, it is quite the commitment, but so many people that love Mariana Zapata say that this is their favorite book by her, so I'm definitely going into this with pretty high expectations. And like I said, I loved From Lukov with Love so much that I have a feeling I'm going to love this book just as much. So next we have a book that has been on my shelves for well over a year, and this is a YA contemporary author that I have been meaning to get into for a long time, because literally every book that she has written written sounds so good to me. So that is Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. So I currently own this book and Monday's Not Coming by her. I also really want to check out Let's Hear a Rhyme, I think that one's called, and then her most recent release is called Grown, and I really want to read that at some point, but I thought that I would start with one of her backlist titles. So it says, Mary B. Addison killed a baby allegedly. She didn't say much in that first interview with detectives, and the media filled in the only blanks that mattered. A white baby had died while under the care of a church-going black woman and her 9-year-old daughter. The public convicted Mary and the jury made it official, but did she do it? She wouldn't say. There's more to the synopsis, but I don't want to spoil myself. I think this is more of a thriller. If I'm not mistaken, I think Tiffany D. Jackson writes like YA thrillers, I think. But this sounds so intriguing, and I've just heard nothing but phenomenal things about Tiffany D. Jackson in general. So I'm really excited to get to this in 2021. Next is pretty much a classic science fiction novel at this point, and that is The Martian by Andy Weir. Once again, I've had this on my shelves for over a year at this point, and I've just heard nothing but phenomenal things about it, and that it is like the perfect science fiction novel to like get into the genre, especially if you're new to adult science fiction. So I'll just read a little bit of the synopsis. It says, 6 days ago, astronaut Mark Watney became one of the first people to walk on Mars. Now he's sure he'll be the first person to die there. After a dust storm forces his crew to evacuate the planet while thinking him dead, Mark finds himself stranded on Mars's surface with no way to signal Earth that he's alive. Okay, so that sounds kind of terrifying, but I've also heard that this book is kind of funny, like kind of entertaining. I guess his character is kind of quirky and funny, I don't know. But I've just heard nothing but positive things about this one, so it's definitely past time that I finally read it. Next up, we have To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. So this sounds like it's a dark and twisted version of The Little Mermaid, and that immediately drew me in. So it says on the back, Princess Lyra is siren royalty and the most lethal of them all. With the hearts of 17 princes in her collection, she is revered across the sea until a twist of fate forces her to kill one of her own. To punish her daughter, the Sea Queen transforms Lyra into the one thing sirens loathe most, a human. Robbed of her song, Lyra has until the winter solstice to deliver Prince Elian's heart, Elian? I'm not sure, Prince Elian's heart to the Sea Queen or remain a human forever. Ooh, that sounds so good. And I've been so into more like dark and twisted YA fantasy stories, so this sounds like the perfect book for that. Next is a 2020 release that I kept trying to get to this year, and it just hasn't happened, and I don't think it's going to happen before the end of December. So that is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. First of all, can we just admire this cover together? Like, it's so beautiful and purple and everything. Like, purple's my favorite color, that's why I'm freaking out. But this is a YA contemporary, and it says, Liz Leighty has always believed she's too black, too poor, too awkward to shine in her small, rich, prom-obsessed Midwestern town. But it's okay. Liz has a plan that will get her out of Campbell, Indiana forever, attend the uber-elite Pennington College, play in their world-famous orchestra, and become a doctor. Okay. That already has drawn me in because I'm a musician, I'm an opera singer, and oh man, that just sounds so good. But when the financial aid she was counting on unexpectedly falls through, Liz's plans come crashing down until she's reminded of her school scholarship for prom king and queen. Okay, so I do remember that part of the synopsis, that she ends up running for prom queen to get a scholarship, but yes. This sounds amazing. Next is a book that I feel like everyone and their mother has read at this point, and that's mainly because it was a pick for Reese's book club, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I don't know too much about this book. I just know that it's like a murder mystery, maybe also a romance, and I think the main character is like a social pariah. I'm just gonna read some of the synopsis. It says, for years, rumors of the Marsh Girl have haunted Barkley Cove, a quiet town on the North Carolina coast. So in late 1969, when handsome Chase Andrews is found dead, the locals immediately suspect Kaya Clark, the so-called Marsh Girl. That sounds really intriguing. I remember Emma from Emma Books in particular just raving and raving and raving about this book, and like I said, everybody has read this at this point. So I'm definitely behind the 8 ball in terms of this book, but nonetheless, I am really looking forward to checking this out next year. Next up, we have an adult fantasy romance that has been so hyped and so raved about in 2020 that I just couldn't resist buying a copy for myself, and I have a feeling that I'm going to love it as much as everybody else. And I'm excited because this also ended up winning the Goodreads Choice Awards for the romance category this year. And so that is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So this is book 1 in a series. We're centering around Poppy. She is a maiden and she has a very special role in this kingdom. She's getting ready for her ascension. I'm not really sure what that means because they don't really talk about it in the synopsis, but essentially she has to stay pure. She can't have any romantic relationships or anything like that. And then this guy Hawk, who is her bodyguard, shows up in her life and things get very interesting from there. So yeah, these are all chunky books. I also have the second book, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and then the third book is coming out in April. So yes, I am so pumped about this. I'm definitely reading this in January because that is how excited I am to start this series. Next is a duology that was on my 2020 TBR. I did make a video last year about all of the series that I wanted to read in 2020, and this duet unfortunately did not get read. But that is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I have slowly but surely been working my way through all of her backlist titles at this point, and this is a YA duology that takes place in an interesting, like, fantastical dystopian society. All I really know about it is that in this world, every bad act that is committed by humans creates a monster. Apparently there are also different kinds of monsters that can be created depending on the act. So it says, Kate Harker wants to be as ruthless as her father to prove she's worthy to stand beside him and lead their city. August Flynn wants to be human, but he isn't. He's a monster, one that can steal souls with a song, his own father's secret weapon. Their city is divided, their city is crumbling. Kate and August are the only two who see both sides, the only two who could do something. But how do you decide whether to be a hero or a villain when it's hard to tell which is which? So yes, that sounds so good. I am sad that I didn't get to this in 2020, but it happens. Next up is probably one of the most, if not the most, hyped up YA fantasy that was released in 2020, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. From what I understand, this kind of incorporates dark academia with elements from the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. It says, after her mother dies in an accident, 16-year-old Bree Matthews wants nothing to do with her family memories or childhood home. A residential program for bright high schoolers at UNC Chapel Hill seems like the perfect escape, until Bree witnesses a magical attack her very first night on campus. A flying demon feeds on human energies. A secret society of so-called Legendborn students who hunt the creatures down, and a mysterious teenage mage who calls himself a Merlin and who attempts and fails to wipe Bree's memory of everything she saw. Okay, well, the memory wiping is giving me like Men in Black vibes, but that synopsis sounds very intriguing. I adore this cover. Look at this, like, the colors are stunning. I love the art style. And literally everyone that I follow that has read this book has given it 5 stars. Everyone is just raving and raving about it. So yes, I definitely need to read this in 2021. Next up is a book that I definitely need to get to because the sequel is set to come out in 2021, and that is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. So this is the first book in a spin-off series of the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I guess you could say the Six of Crows duology as well. So as far as I know, this series is centering on King Nikolai and kind of the aftermath of everything that went down in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And now Ravka, which is the kingdom that they all live in, is like decimated because of everything that happened in that series. And so he's just trying to rebuild everything, and he's trying to rule this country. And I know that Zoya, who was a pretty major character in the Shadow and Bone trilogy as well, she is heavily featured in this, and I think there's a romance between the two of them, so I'm intrigued. And like I said, the sequel is set to come out March 30th of 2021, so I definitely need to get to this pretty soon. Next is another series that was on my 2020 TBR, and it just didn't happen, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So this is a science fiction series. It was originally a trilogy, but now Pierce Brown has been releasing a second trilogy, and I think 5 books total are out now, so we are still awaiting the 6th book. But I have heard nothing but phenomenal things, at least about this first trilogy. I don't know the consensus about the second trilogy, so I might just read these 3 books and just leave it at that. I don't really know, but I know that this is about Darrow. It says Darrow is a Red, a member of the lowest caste in the color-coded society of the future. Like his fellow Reds, he works all day, believing that he and his people are making the surface of Mars livable for future generations. So I know that this ends up being one of those dystopian series where the people kind of rise up and revolt against their government. And I know that Darrow, I think, becomes a gold, which I think is the highest caste in the society. I don't know. It's a very interesting premise. So it's definitely like a dystopian / science fiction. So I need to read this in 2021 because it has just been on my TBR for so long at this point. So next up we have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is a very reflective cover. And so this is book 1 in a science fiction series by him. It's a YA science fiction series. First of all, I love this cover. This cover is everything. And so I thought that to get into Brandon Sanderson, it would be better to start with his YA stuff than like his adult fantasy, because those books are very intimidating to me. Most of his fantasy novels are like huge, like over 500 pages at least. So yeah, I thought this would be a really good way to kind of get into his writing style. So I know this is about Spensa, and her world has been under attack for decades. Now pilots are the heroes of what's left of the human race, and becoming one has always been Spensa's dream. Since she was a little girl, she has imagined soaring skyward and proving her bravery, but her fate is intertwined with her father's, a pilot himself who was killed years ago when he abruptly deserted his team, leaving Spensa, the daughter of a coward. Her chances of attending flight school slim to none. So I'm really excited about this. I really have been getting into science fiction in general, so this sounds like a really good series to start. Next up we have an adult fantasy series that has been so hyped, and the final book came out in November of this year, and it's just well past time that I read it, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So it says, when Rin aced the emperor-wide test to find the most talented youth to study at the academies, it was a shock to everyone, to the test officials who couldn't believe a war orphan from Rooster Province could pass without cheating, to Rin's guardians who always thought they'd be able to marry Rin off to further their criminal enterprise, and to Rin herself, who realized she was now finally free of the servitude and despair that had made up her daily existence. That she got into Sinigard, the most elite military school in the Nakara Empire, was even more surprising. But surprises aren't always good, and I do not want to spoil myself for anything else that occurs in this series, but yes, I have just heard so many people rave and rave about this series, and it also sounds like this is a great series to read to kind of bridge the gap between reading YA fantasy and reading more complicated adult fantasy stories. So yes, I am super pumped about this one. Next is a book that has been sitting on my shelves for way too long, and that is a shame because it is such a stunning book and I've just heard nothing but amazing things about, and that is Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. So this is the UK edition if you're curious. I'm going to show you guys the naked hardcover because it is just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, look at that. Are you kidding me? This is probably the most beautiful book on my shelves. And then if you're curious, this is the back of the dust jacket. But this is a middle grade series. Actually, I do kind of want to get more into middle grade, at least the more like iconic middle grade stories. And this one has been compared to Harry Potter in that a lot of people think it is just as amazing as the Harry Potter series. And I know that the 3rd book, I think that one's called Hollowpox, just came out like a month or 2 ago. So I definitely need to start this series. Like I said, this book has been on my shelves for probably a couple of years at this point, and I'm just going to read a little bit of the synopsis. It says, not only does Morgan Crow's curse mean she's blamed for all bad luck, she's also destined to die on her 11th birthday. She bravely accepts her doom, but in a very surprising twist of fate, before the clock strikes 12 on eventide and the howling shadow wolves arrive, is whisked away by a remarkable man called Jupiter North and taken to the secret city of Nevermore. I think it's about all of these different obstacles that she has to face in order to become a member of the Wondrous Society. So this sounds absolutely fantastic, and it just needs to happen in 2021. And last but not least, I thought I would talk about 3 nonfiction books that I really want to get to this year. And I have really been getting into nonfiction lately because I've just learned so much from these books, and it's definitely past time that I just take the initiative and educate myself about very important issues in our society. So the first one I want to talk about is the new Jim Crow. So this is Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. This is like a classic at this point, I think. Yeah, this is the 10th anniversary edition. So this book has been out for quite a few years. And like the cover tells you, this is all about mass incarceration, which is an issue that I definitely need to be more educated on. The second book that I want to get to is Eloquent Rage, A Black Feminist Discovers Her Superpower by Brittany Cooper. I don't have much to say about this one, but I think this one is definitely more of a memoir, but I know that I'm going to learn so much from this book, and so many people that I follow have just raved and raved about this. So really excited about this one. And then last but certainly not least is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. It says stories from a South African childhood. So Trevor Noah is a comedian that I have been following for quite some time. I need to watch his Netflix specials, but he is the host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, I believe. And so I watch his show all the time. I think he's hilarious, but he also brings up really important issues and just talks about them in the perfect way, I feel like. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, I really love him and his work. So I'm really excited about reading this memoir. All right, guys, that's going to be it for the 21 books that I want to read in 2021. Definitely leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of the books that I brought up in this video, or if you want to tell me your 2021 TBR. I would love to hear from you guys. If you made it to this part of the video, I would love it if you would leave an emoji. Let's see what emoji I want to go with. You know what? Let's go with the crystal ball emoji. I'll put the picture over here. So I would love it if you would leave a comment down below with that emoji included. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!